Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for session number 3 of our 6-part webinar series. I know given the current climate, everyone has a lot going on in their business and their life, and we definitely appreciate you spending your time with us this morning. Before we get into a lot of the content that we have here, I wanted to quickly run through some ground rules for the webinar. First thing is audio. We want to make sure that you hear us crystal clear, whether you're using your computer or your phone. Use the GoToWebinar platform to choose whichever one works best. And this is an open panel discussion. We have 3 retailers on with us today, and we're looking for your questions at the end. So please submit your questions using the GoToWebinar platform, and we will address them in our Q&A at the end. Finally, a lot of the questions that we get are in regard to the video, and we will be sending a recording of this out after. So if you need to leave a little bit early, that's fine. We will be sending a recording out. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our CEO of Management One, Mark Weiss.
Well, thank you, Nico. And I want to thank Andy, Maureen, and John to be with us today and for joining us. First, we want to acknowledge just the anxiety and frustration that all of you are feeling. I was thinking all last night how to address the elephant in the room and didn't want to be remiss talking about it. And I thought MR Magazine handled this well. Karen Albert Grossman, who's the editor, shared this message of resilience and support. This is from Ken Giddon at Rothman's. Our New York store was looted last night. While unfortunate, we will definitely get back up. We recognize that this is a moment of profound anger in this community, and we support those who are working to achieve justice for Black Americans. Karen went on to say, with positivity, resourcefulness, compassion, and creativity, we can implement change in our business and in our society. I know we're all dealing with this at both an emotional and mental level, and we all have enough fears and concerns with our recovery. So there's a lot on all of our plates, but we want to stay focused through this and get healthy and be healthy as a society and as businesses. And one of our panelists, Maureen Doran, who owns Skirt, her store was also affected, and just wanted to open this up to just talk a little bit about what you've gone through, Maureen.
Hi, everybody. So one of my stores is in Philadelphia, and just right in the heart of where lots of this was taking place. And I just watched on the news with everybody else. And fortunately, my store was not looted. Every other store on my street was. Across the street, next door, every store, but the store next door to me was set fire. So that may have, in a strange way, saved me from my windows being broken, but just some smoke damage to my store. So just trying to keep things in perspective. And we have insurance, and I have 2 other stores that I have to focus on keeping running and reopening. We're just getting reopened on Friday. We were planning on opening the Philadelphia store. That will be delayed, and my New Jersey store will open on June 15th. And in the midst of all this, I'm just leaning hard on all of my resources, including my Management One affiliate, and still trying to be planful and strategic, and I have a great support team of people that will help me rebuild. So focusing on the positive. So many people that next morning neighbors out cleaning the graffiti off windows, sweeping the sidewalks. I said, I saw many more people doing that the next morning than I saw looting the stores on the news. The streets in Philadelphia were crowded with neighbors from all backgrounds, cleaning, helping, crying. It was really something to see.
Well, thank you, Maureen. I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to move into our negotiation today. And in the last webinar, we talked a lot about the 3 big expenses, and today we're focusing on 2 of them, and we're going to give you some tools to use. Every situation is different. Every client's different. We represent 23 different verticals, you know, from apparel to home furnishings to college bookstores. But so there's different considerations in deciding on action steps in all of your businesses. Current examples of what your peers are achieving and doing, opportunity for us to have a forum to discuss ideas and generate ideas. Every situation might have constraints, and situations need to be considered relative to your own individual issues and so forth. And we're giving you tools to do your homework to prep for negotiations, because the key to negotiation is how well you prep. I want to say that our information we are presenting is informational. It does not necessarily represent recommendations of Management One. Facts and circumstances vary from business to business. You should consult legal and/or tax counsel regarding any specific circumstances. But we are giving you real life examples and, you know, what we would call best effort and best practices. Again, our purpose is to provide financial security for our people, our clients, and our affiliates. Our focus is merchandise intelligence and education for our independent retail community. And we are retailers first, unlike many other unlike other companies. I come from a retail background. We think about how things affect and impact retailers and what information and education can benefit them in any situation. I want to introduce Andy Wheel. Andy is a client, a friend, owns Pockets Luxury Menswear in Dallas and Plano, Texas. He also has a Peter Millar franchise. John Bryan owns Knuth Shoes and Apparel with his wife, Sherry. They have 2 stores in Pepper Pike and Westlake. Knuth Shoes and Apparel is an icon in the Cleveland area. I hail from Cleveland, and it's one of the most popular stores in town. Maureen Doran owns Skirt. You had an opportunity to meet her also in the last webinar, and she just spoke eloquently and articulately about what she's experiencing today. So I want to thank the panelists for being here. For those who know me, they know that preparation is critical and important. Every battle is won before it is fought. I think it's a great, I don't know what Sun Tzu actually looks like, but this was the best example I could get. I guess he's remembered in a statue today. But he wrote the book, The Art of War, and you know, business is a strategy. It's a chess game, and every battle, and you have a lot of battles that you're going to fight in now and going forward for the next foreseeable period of time. And how you prepare for it could ultimately determine the results that you achieve. And we're going to talk about how to prepare today. So we're going to talk about negotiation, and I would certainly encourage you all to go on Google, research it, look at it, read, take courses. Certainly, negotiation is important, and coming to the negotiating table is critical. I highlighted a few of them that I think are strong. One is do your homework, focus on interests and not positions, avoid ultimatums. That fits into avoiding positions, remove emotion. You know, when you're debating or arguing or negotiating, it's best to keep emotions on the side. I have to say, one of the best courses I took in college was debate. I learned a lot of skills in debate, and one of the keys is to do your homework and stick to the arguments. Be creative in problem solving is extremely useful. Don't depend on somebody else to be creative, but be creative yourself and use resources that are available to be creative. Don't feel like every idea has to come from you. Most of the best ideas come from other people you work with, people at Management One, your friends, your peers. Everybody's got ideas out there. Don't be afraid to solicit them, and don't ever feel like you're alone. A lot of the best ideas I've had have come from other, not that I've had, but one of the best ideas that I've employed have come from other people. And then, of course, make sure you document all agreements, even if that's summing up a conversation at the end of a negotiation and writing it up in an email and sending it to the parties involved. And I'm not going to go into detail, but you'll all get, and there's other things that we're not going to go into heavy detail because we really want our panelists to speak today and talk about their experiences. But all of this is available to you, and every resource that we use, we footnote so you can go directly to the source. Mike Alec, who's our new president, introduced me to this. I wish I had known this 40 years ago, but it's a term called BATNA, Best Alternative to Negotiating an Agreement. And for those of you that have hit the wall with your landlords, this is probably something to consider, but it provides an alternative if negotiation fails. It provides negotiating power, and it identifies the worst price you are willing to accept. That position, you have to know that. The opposite is what your happy price is, but also you need to understand what your worst price is. We could probably do a 2-hour session on negotiating, but today we're going to talk about doing your homework. But the book, Getting to Yes, is on the screen, and it has been obviously updated and revised, but this is a well-known book, and probably one worth downloading. It also comes in audio for those of you that enjoy audio. So when we talk about doing your homework, and we're going to talk about vendor negotiation first and then lease negotiation, we're going to give you some examples of some things that some of our clients have negotiated. But in terms of vendor performance, we're going to also give you a tool here, but identify the categories and vendors that are performing well. Look for a period or a season. In the past, we've talked to you about taking your vendors and ranking them A, B, and C, because there's vendors you're probably not going to go forward with. Looking at sell-through. How does it fit into your merchandising strategy? Is this for a new client or to build an existing client? There's lots of questions here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but again, this will be in your video. And if you want a PowerPoint presentation, you can certainly ask us for that too. I think it's important to know how you see this vendor trending forward. Your point of view, your merchandising vision, your merchandising strategy is important. It's important for where it was, but it's also important for where it's going to. And we've talked at length about acceleration of change. Well, culturally, we're accelerating and changing. And the vendors that may have been important to you in the past, are they going to continue to be important to you in the future? Will they be more important, less important? These are thoughtful discussions and strategies to have. Paul has spoken eloquently and articulately at the last webinar about chasing hot items and moving into areas that are strong for you and not weak. And then, of course, always look at your vendor at the category level, because not all vendors are strong in all categories. And it's important to buy into their strengths and not their weaknesses. So in creating a vendor scorecard, we've come up with our own. You want to obviously choose the period analyzed. You want, again, I would encourage you strongly to sort it by vendor, by category by vendor, or by class by vendor. So here are my skirt classes, here are my suit classes, here are my dress band classes, here are my tabletop classes, here are my athleisure classes, here are my sandal classes, and then the vendors within all of those, with a description, of course, the quantity you will receive, the dollars you will receive, cost dollars you received, the receiving margin, which is important, sold quantity sell-through, sold dollars, retail, sold margin, quantity on hand, and cash margin. If you build this scorecard, certainly get in touch with your point of sale company so they can help you engineer the reports. Most point of sale systems are able to create these reports. Certainly if you're shopping for a new point of sale system, make sure that you review the ability to create a scorecard with your vendors. This is a template that we created. If your POS system doesn't create these but does create other reports, you can put these in. I chose orchards here. This was a period of time. The first column is, again, the description. The second column, this follows the outline that I previously gave you. But if you just look at, for example, this period, the cash margin is 50.6. So that means if you look at metrics, that's very good. That means that you've brought enough in to pay for your purchases, and you have also brought enough in to pay your expenses as long as your expenses are below 50.6. But notice the difference between the 50.6 and the 59.51. There's a big difference between gross profit and maintained markup and cash margin. Maintained markup in this issue is 59.51. So you're saying, well, wow, you know, this was great for me. I got a 61% initial markup. My markdowns were only 1.5% at cost, under 4% at retail. It's been a great class for me, and it has. But the difference between the maintained markup and the cash margin is what's still sitting on the walls, which is 86 units or 19,000 at retail. If you look at short sleeve, vendor C, for example, low price point, but poor sell-through, only a 38.7% cash margin. Might want to rethink this. If you go down to vendor E, long sleeve sport shirts, $380 average unit price, 85% sell-through, 49.5% cash margin. If they sell half of what's left, even if they mark it down, it doesn't matter what they mark it down to, they've made their money out of it. So it's important to look at this. Matter of fact, in this whole classification, the vendors that did well did so well that it supports the vendors that didn't do well. So there's different metrics tell you a different story. You need to look at all the metrics, including cash flow, and compare it to the MMU as you begin to grade and sort your vendors and decide, you know, who you want to go forward with and who you don't. And you can look at this and say, gee, I wish I had gone deeper here, not so deep there, and make some good decisions on it. But this is an example of a scorecard. The last webinar, you asked us to go into a little bit more detail, and you can certainly call your Management One affiliate to go over scorecards with you. Call us, and matter of fact, I think, Nico, we have this in the toolkit now, right? In the playbook.
We are going to be putting this in the playbook this week. There's going to be an email going out with an updated edition of the playbook that will include a template for this. Yes. Okay,
thank you. Next slide. Now that's to determine what your that scorecard's purpose is to allow you to determine, you know, where your strengths are, to give you a global look of what's working for you and what's not. This is a drill down. So when you're negotiating with your vendors, this gives you an idea of what you own and what you're going to have to sell at what price to get out of this vendor, and what your you know, what the cost to you is going to be. We put on this slide transparency counts. When you're negotiating with a vendor, the vendor is concerned about if they give up too much, is that going to be fair to the other vendors that you're dealing with? So if I give you a bigger discount, is somebody else going to give you less of a discount, and am I paying for somebody else's mistakes? So in this situation, you're being transparent. We sold at cost during this period of time $17,000. Our balance at cost that we own is $34,000. At retail, it's $88,000. If it takes me a 35% markdown to sell off the balance of the stock, those markdowns at cost are $11,935. My initial invoice is $55,000. My markup 61.2. Sold full price. What I sold at full cost, full value, was $17,000. I need a markdown allowance of $11,935. I'm willing to pay $43,663 or a 21.5% discount. I need an $11,000 credit allowance. This is a very fair and reasonable thing for you to bring to your vendor and say, look, this is what I sold, this is what I have left, these are the discounts I feel like I need to take for me to be whole on, and I'm not even going to be whole on this. 35% is a significant discount at cost. So if I could be at 45%, and it might be, you might think it has to be 45%, and that changes the number to 15,000, which means I need a credit allowance of 15,000. This gives you some opportunity to do some homework, share with the vendor what the hit is. That's a huge markdown to take for the balance of the season because of COVID. So I think you're showing pain, and you're being fair and honest and transparent, and the vendor is going to have to experience some pain along with it. And so this is a worksheet that you can easily get this information. Maybe you don't want to do it for smaller vendors, but in some of your significant vendors, this is what it looks like. And by the way, I just want to thank one of our clients. This isn't made up information. This is actual real information that we're using here. So I'd like to kick this off with John, and just talk a little bit about your experience in both the shoe industry and the apparel industry, the process you've gone through, John, and some of the results you've achieved.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My approach has not been nearly as sophisticated as the one Mark just outlined, but it will be. I'm excited to use these tools. I'll give you a little bit about our process. I'm fortunate to have an amazing bookkeeper, and she has developed great relationships with vendors over a long period of time. And in addition to that, we've had really good credit and pay history for a long, long time. So I think that works to our significant advantage when we start talking to vendors. So the process is typically Fran will contact them, and she'll be indicating that what we're looking for is 40%, which is pretty random, but we've been successful on a number of situations where a vendor says, sure, here's 40%. We've had a couple that were even greater than that. Where I get involved is when somebody says, no, we're not doing anything, then typically I'll, give them a call or an email and just outline where we've been with them, what our relationship has been, and where it's likely to continue to go. Because whoever I'm talking to may not really have any idea of the level of business that Knuth is bringing to their company. So I think they need to know that. And additionally, I indicate that, which is fair, I think, that the people that partner with us will be the people that we're most likely to go forward with strong relationships. To continue strong relationships, we need strong partnerships in good times and bad. Now, that being said, it has to be fair for everybody, because the vendors are not, they're not all in great shape either. They're just like the rest of us. So I think it has to be fair, and it needs to work for both parties. But we've been, as Mark said, quite successful. I've had very few people turn us down cold. And every one of our shoe vendors, and we started as a shoe store, it's significantly less part of our business now than it was initially, but we've had every shoe vendor participate in some way. So I feel like they've really come to the table for us. That's about all I have for you.
Well, that was great. And again, if you have questions, please post them, and we'll get to them towards the end of this. Maureen, you want to talk about some of your experiences?
Sure. Hi. Yeah, I've really tried to look. I got a lot from speaking and listening on the last podcast I participated in, and hearing what Gary from Hilden had to say, and really remember that I do need these vendors too. I want them to stay in business, especially my A vendors. I worked with my M1 affiliate Margot to look at our vendor performance and kind of classify my vendors into A, B, and C, and start at the top with my A vendors. And as we've all said, walked away sometimes from the negotiation not feeling awesome because I gave on some points to make them happy, but feeling like it worked for both of us. And I want these vendors to still be standing when this is all over, because they're my A vendors. They are the ones that my customers want and that keep me profitable. So what they seem to want is me to take in some spring and summer goods and me to reduce my fall orders as little as possible. What I want is help with my current payables. And when we were able to combine those two things, and when I looked at the vendors that I owed money to, and you know, and was able to at the same time negotiate reducing those payables and taking in some goods at a discount at the same time, that's when I got the best result. I always made sure these were goods that I actually wanted. They were from my A vendors. They were things that I thought I could sell on the small website I've been able to pop up over the last couple months, that I was able to sell through these consignment boxes we've been sending out to people. But, you know, it was mutually beneficial negotiating that worked for me. And then we got creative sometimes. I am prepay with a lot of my vendors. It was working for me. Before, you know, I had got set up that way with some years ago and kept it that way. And it really, you know, bit me in the butt when this closed, because I thought, oh, well, my negotiating power is done with vendors that I've already paid. But I went in anyway. I was honest and you know, transparent about what this was going to do to me with goods that I owned and had already paid for, and that I was how it was going to sink me. I shared my on hands with me and showed them the math of what this would do if they couldn't help me. And in a lot of cases, almost resoundingly all of them, they worked with me. They gave me credits towards when they looked at how much goods I owned and what that was going to do. And we did the math down the line. I was able to get credits on future orders, credits on fall orders. And in some cases where we really couldn't make it work, we really reached an impasse, we got real creative. And in one case, a vendor who is my number one or two vendor, they could not give me a discount. Their hands were tied. They just couldn't do it. I was prepaid. I owned a tremendous amount of their goods. They were not able to offer me any discounts. I was frustrated. They were frustrated. And they instead offered me an in-store appearance with that brand's designers, which is a huge deal for me. I would have never been able to, they've never offered anything like that to a, you know, independent retailer like me. I've never heard of this designer visiting anybody but a department store. And while I wasn't thrilled with that, I would have preferred a discount. That was something. And I left the table feeling like they do care about me. They did value me. This will really boost sales in the fall. So that was a creative way that we both feel like we were supporting each other.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh.
Thank you, Maureen. Andy, you're up next, and
Okay.
you're menswear business, and please share your encounters. Thank you.
Well, I started, it started with assessing all my vendors, what I had in payables, and also, not specifically an A, B, and C system, but I knew, their importance to me, how I felt about them going forward, and was honest, or try to be honest with myself about, am I an important vendor for them, and why is that? And then, early on, I did send out. Well, I also assessed, how does this vendor, to work with is, from everything from how do they ship me, when in my shipping windows do they ship me, the general relationship as it was. And then, early on, I sent out some letters to some of the key ones. Picked up the phone and called and chatted with several of the others. I would say I've probably, as far as in actual vendors, probably reached out to 95% of them at this point. and have had, the ones that would not give me any kind of discount, I tried to show them, why I was, showed them some kind of hard numbers to why I needed a discount for spring goods, and showed that to them, but also would assess, for as far as what, some of that was predicated on when I was shipped in the shipping window. Vendors that were very good shipping shipped me early. I had some opportunity to sell goods. My needs were a little bit less, and I was trying to be, fair about that. Again, in the spirit of, these are partnerships and relationships, and we a lot of time friendships. And just but not being emotional about it, but these are the facts, and this is what I need. Some of those I would look not only for the spring, but looking at how I would handle my fall goods as well. Looking for some, making sure we get a little bit of help for that unknown climate on the goods that we keep. But also very important for me was to have some control over when those goods are released and the cadence at which they're released, and getting that discount and a little bit of extended terms for that, so that the total package turned out to be something that I felt like would give me some protection, but also be something that they could live with as well. And for the most part, people want to work something out. I think in our side, I think there's a lot of unknown on what's still going to be deliverable in the fall, and so I've held that out a little bit, understanding that there's going to be some fallout and how that's going to affect us, and so that some of these guys don't want to cancel certain goods off, but if we buy things as packages, we need to have that. And I think that that can add value, because to Mark's point, those are goods that if it ends up being a bad buy, you're going to give all that cash back as you try to get rid of it on sale. So just try to go to the table with as many different bullets as I could, and and just talk to them about all of them, and so that there was a give and take on all of those, and so that somewhere along the line I'm protected and get a fair and good deal for myself. And I may not feel great about it, like one of the other panelists said, but if we both don't feel great about it, then we probably gave a little bit and came out ahead, but we'll both come out of this in a partnership.
One of the things that all three of you commented on, and we had a little rehearsal session yesterday that I got to learn quite a bit. And you all commented that except for the smaller vendors, a lot of your vendors weren't as interested in the cash up front for a deeper discount, but were more interested in working something out going forward. Could you comment a little on that? Did I get that right? So.
For me, for sure, I approached a couple of them with a deep discount, saying I'll pay you today, I'll wire it, or I'll send you euros, whatever I had to do. And I didn't have anybody that was interested in the deeper discount. They would rather extend it, even 180 days with some discount or no discount, than to have cash in hand.
I had the exact same experience. I kind of thought, cash is king. If I can offer them money now, I can get a bigger discount. And that proved to be not the case ever.
By the way, one of our clients that also does fast fashion and had a lot on her American Express ended up negotiating 36 months on her American Express card, 0 interest. So for those of you that use American Express, I thought I'd share that. John, have you had a similar experience or not? Did you find that they weren't that interested in deep discounts and just working on a longer term basis?
Well, yeah, initially, but my need right now is the discount so I can mitigate the disaster that was spring. And eventually they came around. They're interested in, what we're going to do for the next season, of course, and that's tied in. But we were very successful, or have been, and hopefully continue to be very successful getting the discounts on stuff that we received prior to the shutdown we experienced in mid-March. And American Express, I have to say, has been very, very easy to deal with.
Thank you. Nico. We had gone over this slide last time, and this is part of doing your homework. And we talked about, in negotiating, it's important to know what you're going to be able to afford. And as you begin to look forward, and you begin to project your revenues going forward, whatever percentage you're going to lower those revenues, you've got to right size your business. And as we discussed last Tuesday, and I've got this screen back up here again, take what you paid in total rent for 2019, divide it in your total sales to get an idea of what your percentage rent was, and then look at what your run rate now is, and know that at that same percentage, this is what you can afford monthly. I want to reemphasize that expect a 2 to 3 year recovery on this. Tie any rent increases to 2 to 3 months of revenue equal to or greater than 2019 comparative months. Talked to a client yesterday, and they were offered space in a competing center with that could be a very attractive situation. So you get a sense of what the value of real estate is going to be. And we're going to go over some things that some of our clients have gotten so far. And remember, your landlord doesn't want you to go out of business or leave at the first chance you get. We're hearing a lot about, and Maureen actually expressed this to me last week, well, let's kind of just see what happens where they're not willing to make a commitment one way or another. And you can work that in your favor. One client got 37% off their rent for the rest of 2020, and April was forgiven. One client, I thought this was interesting, and it's actually in a mall, a big mall, with a big time real estate. I don't know if it was Simon or someone else. I don't want to mention, I'm not sure who the landlord is, but they exchanged their rent for tenant improvements now through the end of the year. Another client got 50% off 2020 rent and 25% off for 2021 and 2022, and April was forgiven. Some clients in New York have gotten released from their leases. Percentage rent based on 2019 for the rest of 2020, and then review at the end of the year. One of our affiliates owns a shopping center, and they exchanged taxes and CAM for all of 2020, and asked their clients, all of their people in their shopping center, to sign a 1-year extension to their leases because they didn't want to be dealing with having to replace tenants. And that worked out well, and they retained 100% of their clients. No rent for April and May, and added on to the backside of the lease. Some people use their PPP money to pay what they got as a percentage of their PPP money and attributed that to their April and May rent. Some retailers have gotten nowhere. Their landlords are stonewalling and haven't negotiated anything yet. Reduce space for rent, and this was an idea, I don't know anybody that's done it yet, but add a complementary business as a co-tenant to cover some of the real estate. Mike actually shared that idea. So I'm gonna, there's also a lot I would read. I read, as I said, I read trade publications and look for articles because the national chains will help you pave the road for you. Starbucks, landlords are fuming at Starbucks, but Starbucks has got a lot of money to fight landlords and hopefully set a precedent, and for you to learn from what they're doing. If they do it, if you're in a Starbucks center and they're doing it for Starbucks, it would be they should be able to do the same thing for you. There's also been some good articles in the Wall Street Journal about what the national tenants are doing about their rents. Landlords, at the end of the day, it's expensive for them to replace you. Many of you are important to their centers, and you bring extra traffic. And all of you have had, you know, Andy, you've got 3 locations really. John, you've got 2. Maureen, you've got 3. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences with your landlords and what you've achieved?
Well, I'll start because it'll get better from here. I haven't achieved a thing other than a promise from one of my landlords to come to the table later. So I'll circle back and see if we can't work something out. You know, extended lease at, you know, lower rates. Clearly, the market's going to have to change. But to date, we've been very unsuccessful in this area.
In both locations, even Westlake as well?
Well, Westlake, the guys made a promise of, you know, coming to the table and adjusting something, but you know, it's only an idea at the present, but we'll get there.
Okay, Andy?
The one location, my Dallas location, I've really gotten nowhere. I'm going to take some of the things that you mentioned in this and see if I can't, you know, get a little bit of relief. I've been, you know, a tenant there for several years, and usually am paying the percentage override, and I would think they would want me there, and hopefully they'll, you know, I paid this, you know, all my rent on, you know, I'm always on time and pay it even through this when they wouldn't offer any relief. And so we'll see if they want to give me a little bit of help somewhere. The Plano stores have been better about it. They really want to be partners, and they recognize me as a independent and locally owned store, or stores as it were, with the Plano stores. And they're asking me, they're saying, this is what we've been doing, but, you know, please come to us, you know, if that's going to work, or if it's not, you know, you tell us what we do to help out, or to what do you need out of it? And for my 2 stores, the one store, the partner store with Peter Millar, is a different situation. And again, I think it's about being, I don't want to try to be opportunistic, but I want to be, you know, I want it to be a deal that is, you know, offers me protection and is realistic with the potential of a 2 to 3 year recovery. And then my other pocket store, I think, is will be a little more aggressive and try to put some, you know, even stronger protection. And with that one, though it's a good lease, and I think they certainly want to keep us there because of our heritage in the Dallas area. But I've gotten, so far, there's been nothing signed, or there's been no real tangible progress.
Right, Maureen? Thank you, Andy.
So I have not paid any rent on any of my 3 locations since we closed. I had already, you know, obviously I already paid March when we closed I closed all 3 locations on March 15th. And I'd already paid March's rent. And my landlords and I are kind of doing this careful dance with each other where we're talking, but they're not asking me for money and I'm not offering money. One of my locations, my lease is up December 31st, and he wants me to play the long-term game. So he is like, I'm not going to ask you, and I owe him a lot of money. It's an expensive lease. And he's like, I'm not going to ask you for money. I want you to stay open. I want you to renew your lease. So if you can pay enough to cover, you know, my taxes and insurance and get your doors open again for these last couple months, let's do that. I should have taken Mark's advice and put that conversation in an email and sent it back to him, which I will be doing now that I've attended the seminar. So that was one of my leases. My other lease, he's kind of saying, could you pay me half rent? What can you pay me? And I'm kind of like, I just don't know. I'm not sure. I'm holding on to that money to use it to fill the stores with inventory until my landlords really tell me they need it. That is my game plan. And then my third lease is in Philadelphia. So I really don't know when we're going to be opening now. And I haven't paid him anything. He did offer before the recent circumstances, he had offered to take my security deposit, which was being held in escrow, that for the 2 months rent, and apply it towards April and May, but we hadn't moved forward with that plan. The general consensus between all three of my landlords has been they want me to stay for the long term. They weren't coming out and saying they were going to give me free rent or reduced rent or anything like that, but they definitely don't want me to leave. And so I'm just carefully biding my time and seeing how to work that the best way possible.
Yeah, I think there's so much uncertainty in what's going to happen with the real estate market. And we know that banks can't even get appraisals done right now. So, tying your lease to the value that it once was isn't equal to what it is today. So again, I'm not recommending you do this, but I'm saying that there may be an opportunity where time might be on your side. And I thought Maureen brought up an interesting observation as well. She needs to refill her stores with some inventory, and for her to be able to pay the rent and having an undisrupted, there's going to be disruption in the supply side of inventory going through the end of the year. So we haven't even talked about that today, but that's another consideration that has got to be, top of mind. Hey, Nico, it's back to you. Thank you all. We're ready for questions from the audience.
Absolutely. All right. Lots of questions coming in here. Let me review some here. I wanted to start off first going back to speaking about Amex with vendors. One of our attendees, Rita Mitchell, I'd like to unmute your mic. You had a good warning for the retailers on our panel as well. Rita, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Mike. This has been great. This kind of interchange is vital and awesome. Thank you all for doing this, first and foremost. Second, briefly on the negotiation, whether it's timetable or reduced amount or whatever with Amex or any other credit card lender, just beware of the details as they are documented. Having been a consultant through the global financial crisis and going forward, how it is documented by that credit card is important. If it's documented as a short pay, if it's documented as a negotiation on disaster or whatever, makes a huge difference going forward for future loans when times are better. So not just the extension of the grace, which I must agree, Amex has been very gracious about. Some of the other card companies, not so much. But make certain that whomever does this negotiation is aware of how the credit card company is documenting the end game of the negotiation, because it could come back, to borrow an expression we've heard earlier, it could come back and bite you in the fanny on a future loan thing and show up as a red flag of a short pay.
Okay, Nico. I think we've lost Nico on the questions.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't want to speak over Rita. One of our affiliates was asking, and I think it's a poignant question for all three, who are you speaking to at the vendor level? Is this the billing department, the CFO, the rep? Do you have high up contacts? I'll start with Andy on that one.
For us, we have a lot of smaller vendors that in that case, it may be there may be one person that handles it for the United States. In that case, obviously I speak to him rather than calling Italy. Generally the head of U.S. sales. And at other times it has been the credit manager. Generally the rep, not as much as they've got a vested interest in not to give a discount if they're getting a commission off of it. They're just it's coming off of their table, and so I don't think that they're going to that's just not the right person, I don't think, to speak to in most cases. So for generally, it's been either the owner in the case of small companies, the U.S. agent for European companies, or the credit manager.
And Maureen, how about you?
In my case, it's been a little different. I have been getting the discounts from not the sales rep, but the sales director, and partnered with my sales rep. I think it's really been my buying power and the confirmation that I will be staying with them through this, partnering with them through this, that my fall orders will only be, cut down minimally, that we're going to be partners through this, through the rest of the year. That the power of that, with that conversation with my sales rep and her boss on the sales level, has been what's given me the power to get the discount. That's who's granted me the discount. And then there's been some logistics. So then when those bills, when I go to pay those bills with the factors, with Hilden or Wells Fargo, or whoever holds that paper, I've had to then get my sales rep to put something in writing. And there's been a little bit of red tape, but in the end, that's who I've had the most, that's who I've been negotiating with.
Yeah,
Thank you.
as I said, I'm fortunate in that I have this great bookkeeper who has these relationships. So that's her initial contact, and then if we run into problems, we push it up the line. But typically, that's been adequate. Whether it's a credit manager, usually that's the case, or someone else. That's worked for us.
Excellent. And this one I think is really more for Mark. Maria is saying, what do you recommend for negotiating with a vendor when I'm a much smaller store? Obviously, Maria and Andy, John, they carry a little more weight with some vendors. How do you recommend when you're a much smaller fish in the game? And I think it speaks a lot to some of the metrics you were talking about, Mark.
Yeah, so my answer to that is I'm small, I'm growing, and I won't hurt you as bad. So what I'm asking for is insignificant to what your larger clients are looking at. And smaller clients tend to be extremely profitable for vendors because they don't have to discount with them, where they get more pressure from larger clients for incentives and discounts. So I think that you can use your smallness as an advantage, not a disadvantage. My dad used to do it all the time. We weren't that small, but we weren't that large, and it would almost always work. I'm not going to hurt you that bad. We're not talking about a lot here. And I think that if you put it into terms, but everything's relative. I mean, what you need to get in a discount is equivalent to as a percentage as Maureen or John or Andy. So don't ever let your size diminish what your need for the same results, the same discounts.
Can I jump in here?
Please.
When we bought our business, we were paying 90 to 120 days slow. So I've been there. The one really important part of it is when you're talking to these guys, whether it's factors or whether it's, vendors, is to actually do what you say. It's the old under promise and over deliver. If you say I'm going to send you $1,000 this week and $1,000 next week, you either got to do it or do it a little better, and that builds trust, which is important.
Absolutely.
That's a great point. Thank you, John. It's a great point.
John, I'm actually going to stay with you because you mentioned what a terrible spring it was. One of our attendees was asking, and I'm not going to mention the vendor's name, we don't want to call out specific vendors, but they're asking, how do you suggest dealing or negotiating with the factors that own the spring invoices? One of their vendors has been very understanding, another vendor not so understanding, and they're sending out nasty letters threatening collections if necessary.
So we've been pretty fortunate. I talked to a couple of vendors that were incredibly sympathetic, and I said, look, we're not open. We don't know when we can open. We don't have the cash to pay right now. She one in particular said, perfect, that's all I need to put down. We get it, but we have to make the call. And then we go back to the vendor, and so the heat is off of us from the factor, and then we can talk to the vendor and say, look, we want to work something out, but you got to help us here. And that's worked out.
My
Maureen, if you
experience
had
is
any-
that
Oh, no, Andy, go ahead.
I was just going to say my experience is that the factors, if you're looking for extended terms, they're you discuss it with them and you give concrete times. Like they've been fine with. They say, hey, we can extend that, and then you go to the vendor to negotiate discounts because the factors, in my experience, aren't. That's just not their position. But the terms that even ones that I didn't think I'd get better dating from the factors, they've said sure, no problem, let's do that. I'll note it, and it's keeps just that level of pressure from them off of you.
And Maureen, have you had a similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, just very similar. Just definitely taking every call, even though it seems like you don't have time to take one more call. And it seems separate. The factors want to talk to you, the people that work for Hilden and the credit managers and CIT and all those guys, they need to talk to you too. You have to have a relationship with them as well as talking to your vendors and your sales reps. It's like two separate relationships and you have to manage both and take time to talk to both of them.
Excellent. A couple of folks are asking about percentage discounts. Let's switch to landlords here a bit. I think Mark brought up a good point with metrics. Definitely looking at 2019, I don't really think we can offer a universal percentage starting point. It really depends on your specific size, and last year is always a good starting point. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, I think you need to know what the price that you're going to be comfortable with, that you can afford to pay to stay in business, and make it work. I think that, and if you look at those some of the negotiating tactics, it's imperative that you not commit to something you can't afford to pay that could put you into bankruptcy. So I know the landlord doesn't want that because then they'll get nothing. So I do think that you need to understand that your rent, whether you end up getting 50 or 25% off or 37% off, whatever the number is, it has to be a number that's in line with your rent. I mean, there's some people out there that are paying, they signed leases 3 or 4 years ago when rents were at an all-time high. And those rent structures don't apply for today. And I would also add one thing, and this came up in one of our very first webinars. Negotiate by yourself, not in a group. Everybody's circumstance is different. You may pay well, and you might be in a group with a group of other tenants, and they may not pay as well. Your relationship should stand on its own and on its own merit. And being involved with other people doesn't necessarily, in this case, give you strength. It could actually work against you. And I know a number of examples where retailers opted to go alone and did better than the group did. So just another thought.
Definitely a good point. I was going to try to unmute one of our other attendees, Kelly. She doesn't have a microphone. I'll try to read it verbatim here. She said, I've had success negotiating a percentage rent plus CAM for the remainder of the year, backing into that percentage that if everything remains the same as 2019 from June to December, then the landlord will get the same rent as 2019. But if sales are short, then they give. If they rebound, then the landlord gets more. It's a good way to be a partner. And she only negotiated through December for now. 3 landlords agreed after accepting CAM, only rents for April and May. So
And
that
I
was
think she did well.
Yeah, that was a great position there, Kelly.
Thank you. That you did well. And I think as long as they're open to renegotiate in December, I mean, nobody knows where we're going to be in December. And I know some people that have signed agreements on expecting to have to renegotiate in December. And I don't think that's going to be unusual. Right now, we just have to get between now and the end of the year. And you've got some power. Use it.
Absolutely. We're a little over time here. A lot of other questions coming in are in regard to the vendor scorecard. Mark, a lot of numbers were thrown out at folks, and I think they're a little overwhelmed by that. We are going to release that template for folks to use, but I also discussed with Mark a separate session that we'll send out to folks of us really diving in a little deeper into that performance scorecard. And all registrants, again, as we mentioned at the beginning of this email, will get these slides, they will get the performance scorecard and all of the other tools as well.
Right. Yeah, we'll do a tutorial on how to use that. The point of that slide was to show you to do your homework, and there's homework to be done, and you'll learn a lot, and it'll give you confidence when you talk to people. I mean, there's nothing better than having the data and the information to know how to make good decisions, and you know what's working for you and what's not. I mean, there's great information out there. It should be used.
Absolutely. One thing I'll also mention as well, one of our affiliates, Robert Reedy, mentioned, please speak to the advantage of terms with vendors as opposed to paying with credit card.
I think that's another discussion for another time, but briefly, you know, to the extent that you can use terms, that's great. A lot of people like to use credit cards because of the miles. I don't know that the miles are going to be that important right now. You know, and actually, Maureen actually she's not in a hole now, or maybe she is with COVID, but she got out of a hole using credit cards. So she really did use them to her advantage and limited her buys. So, I mean, there's advantages to terms and credit cards. The biggest problem with using a credit card is you have no recourse. And that's the advantage. Obviously, with terms, you get to pay in the future at some time. As Andy mentioned, he's got up to 180 days to pay for goods. A lot of the goods, at least in luxury men's, is clothing, and it's not going to go stale quickly. So there are a lot of advantages, as Robert mentioned, to using terms, because I think the biggest one is recourse, because if it doesn't come in the way it was supposed to come in, you can send it back and you haven't paid for it and you have leverage. You pay up front with a credit card, you have zero leverage.
Yeah, I agree. The only advantage, and I'm not in any way advising on this, that is Mark's department, but people who I was on credit card with couldn't just blindly ship me goods during this because I was on terms and they could ship. During that week of frenzy where some vendors were just pushing out orders, they didn't push them out because they didn't have a credit card to charge me. So it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I was stuck with goods that I had prepaid, and it made negotiating with these vendors way harder for me. But I also was able to not accept goods because they didn't have my credit card to charge me for them. I don't know what the answer is here. There's problems on both ends. No, I can control when goods arrive when I pay my credit card. I can say I want this week, I want that next week, I want that 3 days later. That's why I was on credit card with some of my vendors still, but it's a conversation for another day, I guess.
Good point. Thank you, Maureen. Okay, I think we're out of time. So we really, the tools will be updated in our playbook. If you have questions, you can contact us at info@management-1. And we decided to change the webinar, next week's webinar, to optimizing your digital channel for success and putting internal store processes at the end. The reason we did that is a lot of stores still are opening, and we're not quite there to review the store processes and what's working, what's not working. We also thought that with some of the things that are going on and stores having difficulty opening, or stores being vandalized, or curfews and shortened hours, staying on top of your digital format is important. A lot of you were very aggressive during COVID while you were closed, reaching out to your customers virtually, digitally, in every possible way. Curbside, all the things that you're doing or did shouldn't stop. I mean, those are critical. I mean, some of our clients are having special events, using curbside. I mean, the imagination is really quite spectacular. I don't want to share this because we'll talk about it next week, but you all are being extremely creative. I just really want to thank Andy, Maureen, and John for being on board. John, give my best to Sherry. We've known John and Sherry for, I think it's close to 30 years now, and really appreciate that. And Andy and Maureen are great friends and clients as well, and really appreciate your time. They all put a time in thinking about this. They put over an hour in yesterday, and their time is valuable, and I can't say how much we appreciate that. So thank you.
Absolutely. And Mark, you also mentioned the playbook as well being updated with some of these tools. We're also in contact with a couple of our retail partners that would like to contribute some content as well. So if we can get to that this week, we will. If not, we will include it in a separate edition next week. But this week, we will include some of the tools we discussed today. And I wanted to echo Mark's sentiments as well with our panelists. Thank you so much for your time. I know this is a tough time for your business and in your life, so we appreciate you joining us today. And the same goes for our attendees as well. We hope you can join us again next week.